Lately, something remarkable has been unfolding within the Catholic Church. There is a new sense of energy and quiet renewal, sparked by the election of a new pope and a growing devotion to young saints who continue to inspire the faithful. Among these figures, Blessed Carlo Acutis stands out with a unique light, his life echoing through this new chapter of the Church. But what has surprised many is an unexpected connection that links this beloved young man to the newly elected Pope Leo XIV. Most of the media has focused on the surprise surrounding Pope Leo's rise and the direction he seems to be taking. Yet beneath the surface, a more subtle and symbolic discovery has begun to emerge. It is not a headline that demands attention, but rather a gentle thread of meaning that connects past and present. It weaves together the lives of saints and spiritual leaders in a way few could have anticipated. This pattern became noticeable while preparing a separate reflection on the life of Carlo Acutis. What stood out was something simple but meaningful: the name chosen by the new pope. At first glance, the name Leo might appear as a respectful tribute to church tradition. But the deeper one looks, the clearer it becomes that this choice may carry a spiritual significance beyond expectations. The name Leo carries with it a history of courage, wisdom, and strong leadership. It is not merely a title from the past, but a symbol filled with prophetic resonance. As people across the world tried to understand the reasons behind the Pope's decision, the significance of that name choice began to take shape. It was not only about honoring tradition, it was about continuing a spiritual message that still speaks powerfully today. Shortly after his election, Pope Leo XIV addressed the College of Cardinals and shared some of the reasons behind his chosen name. Among them was his deep admiration for Pope Leo XIII, a man known for writing one of the Church's most influential documents on social teaching. That document, called Rerum Novarum, was written near the end of the 19th century and became a powerful voice for the dignity of every human life and the responsibility of the Church in the face of social injustice. Its message was both clear and enduring. Every human being is made in the image and likeness of God, and is therefore worthy of justice, respect, and compassion. Though written long ago, those words still echo today in a world that continues to struggle with inequality and division. Choosing to honor that legacy now, in a time of uncertainty and change, seems to speak volumes about the vision of the new pope. But the symbolism did not stop there. Some observant voices pointed out another remarkable detail: the date of Pope Leo's election matched the feast day that commemorates the appearance of Saint Michael the Archangel. According to tradition, this was not just an ordinary day, but the anniversary of a heavenly encounter in which Saint Michael appeared with a divine message and mission. For many, the alignment of this sacred date with the beginning of a new papacy felt like more than coincidence. It opened the door to deeper reflection, especially when remembering that Pope Leo XIII, whose name has now been revived, was known for having a powerful vision involving spiritual warfare. That vision, which moved him deeply, led to the creation of the now famous prayer to Saint Michael, a prayer still said by millions seeking protection in times of spiritual danger. For generations, that prayer has been a shield against fear, a call to courage, and a reminder that the battle between good and evil is not just symbolic but real. In this light, the name of the new pope takes on even greater meaning. It is not just a name chosen from history, but a name that carries a spirit of strength, clarity, and a renewed commitment to holiness at a time when the world needs it most. Earlier today, as part of the Church's daily rhythm of prayer, a powerful reading emerged during the Liturgy of the Hours, a moment of spiritual reflection shared each day by priests, religious communities, and faithful souls around the world. This sacred rhythm includes the office of readings, a time set aside for deep contemplation and nourishment of the soul. What was read today seemed, to many, like more than coincidence. It felt almost providential. The passage declared, "Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels battled against the dragon. Though the dragon and his angels fought back, they were overpowered and cast from heaven." The timing of this passage struck a chord. It came just after the election of Pope Leo XIV and the announcement of his chosen name Leo, a name long associated with strength, vigilance, and spiritual combat. This passage served as a gentle but sobering reminder that the Church is not only a sanctuary of peace and prayer, but also a battleground. It is a place where invisible but very real forces are engaged in a spiritual conflict, one that touches every soul. The Church stands firm in this battle, not with violence, but with the armor of faith, the power of prayer, and the courage to speak the truth. But this was not the only symbol tied to the name Leo. Centuries ago, a Benedictine monk named Bruno had a terrifying encounter with a serpent. Struck with illness and near death, he was suddenly granted a vision of a ladder stretching into heaven. At the top of the ladder stood Saint Benedict himself, holding a crucifix. In that moment, Benedict reached down and touched Bruno with the image of the cross. Miraculously, Bruno was healed. That single moment changed the course of his life forever. The monk who had once been on the verge of death would eventually rise to become pope. And when he did, he took the name Leo IX. His papacy would become known for more than just reforms. He carried forward the spirit of Saint Benedict in profound ways. Among his lasting contributions was the redesign of the Saint Benedict medal, now one of the most cherished symbols of protection in the Church, especially in spiritual warfare. Stories like these reveal the living thread that continues to pass through the Church's history. They are not mere legends from a distant past. They echo into the present moment, reminding us that the spiritual meanings behind names and symbols are alive. The name Leo, when chosen by a pope, is not only about tradition. It speaks of courage in the face of darkness, of healing in times of suffering, and of divine protection that endures through the ages. In our time, these meanings feel more vital than ever. Pope Leo XIII, the namesake admired by the newly elected pope, was known for his intense devotion to the Rosary. During his pontificate, he wrote at least 11 encyclicals entirely dedicated to the importance and power of this Marian prayer. His commitment was not just personal, it was pastoral. His mission was clear: to place the Rosary at the center of Catholic life. So deep was his love for Mary that many came to call him the Rosary Pope. And now, once again, that legacy appears to shine through. In his very first homily, Pope Leo XIV spoke tenderly of the Blessed Virgin Mary, referring to her with reverence as the Mother of God. It was a heartfelt moment that resonated with the faithful. Even the timing of his election added another layer of meaning. He was chosen during the month of May, a time traditionally dedicated to Mary across the Catholic world, a month filled with processions, flowers, and prayers in her honor. All of these moments, his name, his first words, the timing of his election seemed to form a pattern. Not a planned script, but a convergence of symbols and meanings that hint at something deeper unfolding. As these signs continue to emerge, another figure comes into view, someone whose story adds yet another layer of richness to this moment in the Church. Blessed Carlo Acutis. A teenager from the early 2000s, Carlo has become a modern beacon of holiness. His life radiated faith, even in a digital world full of noise and distraction. What made Carlo so remarkable was not just his devotion to prayer, but his deep love for the Eucharist. He once said that spending time before the Blessed Sacrament was like standing in the sun. Just as the sunlight tans the skin, he explained, the Eucharist transforms the soul into a saint. His simple but profound words touched hearts because they came from a young man who lived what he preached. He was not perfect, but he was sincere. He loved video games and had a playful spirit, but his heart was rooted in Christ. And his vision extended beyond the chapel. He believed that technology could be used for good, to spread the message of Jesus to places that had grown distant from the Church. Carlo began building a website to document Eucharistic miracles from around the world. These were not just stories, they were real moments in history where the presence of Christ had been revealed in ways that defied explanation. Carlo hoped that by sharing these testimonies, others would come to believe in the power of the Eucharist and in the nearness of God. His project was not just about data or design. It was a spiritual mission. He wanted to bridge the eternal truth of the Church with the digital tools of today. His dream was to make holiness visible in the everyday life of the modern world. And now, in light of the recent election of Pope Leo XIV, that mission feels even more relevant. Carlo was more than a future saint. He was a reminder that sanctity is not limited by age or era. He showed that holiness can grow in the heart of a teenager, just as it can in a monastery. And now, as the Church begins this new chapter under the leadership of a pope who seems to echo the past while looking to the future, the example of Carlo Acutis continues to shine. Carlo Acutis was like many teenagers in outward appearance. He loved playing video games, had a real passion for soccer, and radiated a joy that made others feel welcomed and at ease. His faith never felt forced or distant, it was sincere, approachable, and deeply lived. Beneath his cheerful nature, however, was a quiet spiritual strength, an unwavering love for God that shaped every part of his short life. At the age of 15, Carlo was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. The illness progressed quickly. Yet through it all, Carlo remained calm, offering every moment of suffering to God with deep trust and peace in his heart. He passed away in the year 2006, leaving behind a witness that continues to touch lives around the world. His final days were not marked by fear or despair, but by a radiant surrender to God's will. Those who walked alongside him during that time were struck by the maturity and grace with which he faced his cross. In the years since, the Church has come to recognize more fully the holiness that marked his life. Plans had been set for his canonization to take place in April, a moment long anticipated by Catholics across the globe. But following the passing of Pope Francis, the Church entered a period of mourning and transition, and the canonization was respectfully postponed. Now, under the guidance of Pope Leo XIV, the announcement of a new date is expected soon, and many believe it will carry an even deeper spiritual meaning. If his canonization becomes the first to take place during this new papacy, it would be a moment filled with symbolism and grace. The recognition of a modern teenager as a saint at a time when the world is marked by uncertainty and rapid change would speak to the Church's continued commitment to holiness, especially among the young. Then came a small but beautiful discovery, one detail that tied together past and present in an unexpected way. As part of a deeper look into Carlo's early life, researchers noted the name of the high school where he spent his final years. It was called the Leo Roman XIII Institute. On the surface, it may have seemed like a coincidence. But now, in the light of recent events, it feels like something more. Carlo did not attend many schools. He never had the chance to go to university. His life on earth was brief. And yet the place where he grew in his faith, studied with his peers, and nurtured his love for Jesus bore the name of Pope Leo XIII, the very pope whose writings and legacy would later inspire a new pontiff to choose the name Leo XIV. The parallels are difficult to ignore. One life came to a holy end. Another life in leadership was just beginning. One pope, more than a century ago, wrote deeply about human dignity, justice, and the importance of prayer. Now, another pope steps forward to carry that same vision into a new century. It is as if the Church is being gently reminded that history does not unfold by accident. It is guided by grace, by providence, and by the steady hand of God. And just when the symbolism seems full, another moment of clarity emerges, a quote from Carlo himself. As he reflected on his illness and all that he would endure, he once said these words: "I offer all the suffering I will have to suffer for the Lord, for the Pope, and for the Church." It is a simple sentence, but one filled with meaning. It reveals the heart of a young man whose love for Christ was not just personal, but deeply connected to the life of the Church and its shepherd. To consider that this young man, now recognized around the world as the first millennial on the path to sainthood, consciously offered his suffering for the Holy Father only for a new pope to emerge years later, bearing the name of the school he attended, feels almost too extraordinary to be explained by chance. It speaks of unity across generations, of a faith that transcends time, and of the mysterious, beautiful ways God continues to guide his Church. Today, the Church is led by a pope who has chosen a name filled with layers of history, devotion, and personal resonance. The name Leo is not only a tribute to a past pope's vision, it is also the very name that graced the school where Carlo Acutis was formed in faith. This alignment of people, places, and moments creates a spiritual thread that now stretches from the life of a teenage saint in the making to the seat of the Holy Father in Rome. But the story of the name Leo does not stop with modern popes. It reaches back even further. One of the most beloved figures to bear that name was Pope Leo the Great, who served the church during the 5th century, a time of chaos, crisis, and fear. His courage remains one of the defining examples of papal leadership. During the height of the invasions led by Attila the Hun, when panic spread throughout the Roman Empire and the city of Rome itself seemed doomed, Pope Leo did something unthinkable. Instead of retreating behind walls or sending envoys, he went out himself. Riding to meet Attila face to face, he stood before one of history's most feared military leaders not with weapons, but with prayer, courage, and faith. That act of bravery would earn him the name Leo the Great. And it would set a tone for the name Leo throughout the centuries, one of courage in the face of danger, strength rooted in faith, and leadership that inspires trust. That legacy continues today through every pope who chooses to carry the name. And now, in the year 2025, that name has returned again. It comes at a time when the Church faces its own challenges, spiritual, cultural, and moral. Yet through the quiet echoes of history, from Carlo Acutis to Pope Leo XIV, we are reminded that God is always at work. His timing is perfect. His plans are never rushed. And his saints, whether popes or teenagers, are always chosen with love. According to sacred tradition and the treasured accounts passed down through centuries, Pope Leo the Great did not face the threat of Attila the Hun with violence or military defense. He did not rally an army or meet brute force with brute force. Instead, he stood firm with only his faith, his words, and a trust in divine authority. It was said that he spoke to Attila not with threats, but with bold grace, reminding him that there was a greater battle to be fought than the conquest of cities, the battle within the human heart. "You have subdued the lands given to the Romans," Leo is believed to have proclaimed. "Now we pray that you, who have conquered others, might conquer yourself." These words, offered not with arrogance, but with sincerity and truth, reached Attila in a way that swords never could. And in a moment that would echo through time, Attila turned back. He withdrew his forces. The eternal city was spared. That single act would etch Pope Leo's name into the pages of history, not as a man of war, but as a man of spiritual courage. His legacy became a living symbol of the triumph of faith over fear, mercy over destruction, and spiritual authority over temporal power. His voice, calling for peace and restraint in the face of chaos, still speaks to a world that continues to long for leadership, for wisdom, and for peace grounded in truth. Now, centuries later, another man has stepped into that same name. Pope Leo XIV walks forward not only in honor of that history, but with the spiritual weight of it resting gently on his shoulders. And yet, it is not a burden. It is a blessing. The name Leo has come to signify more than just leadership. It represents the Church's enduring call to stand as a bridge between darkness and light, between destruction and hope. But there is more to the story. According to pious tradition, something extraordinary took place during Pope Leo's encounter with Attila. The accounts do not stop at words alone. It is said that Attila, known for his ruthless campaigns and hardened heart, saw something that caused him to stop in his tracks. As Pope Leo stood before him in quiet strength, Attila saw two mighty figures standing on either side of the Pope, silent, powerful, and radiant. They held swords and exuded an authority that could not be questioned. According to the legend, these were Saint Peter and Saint Paul, protectors of the faith and pillars of the Church. But that was not all. As Attila looked beyond them, his gaze was drawn to the skies above Rome. And what he saw there changed everything. Hovering above the city, he beheld a heavenly army. A vast host of light, armed not with earthly weapons, but with flaming swords that blazed with a divine fire. It was not a vision of destruction, but one of holy might, an unmistakable sign that Rome was not unguarded, that this city was under the protection of heaven itself. That army, said to be 10 times greater than any earthly force, stood ready. Not one voice was raised in threat. Not one arrow flew. And yet, the message was clear. This was not a city to be taken. It was a city entrusted to God. Attila, the conqueror of empires, the scourge of the Roman world, stood powerless before this vision. Overcome with awe, he abandoned his campaign. He called off the attack. And in a decision that defied all logic, ambition, and the momentum of his conquests, he turned around. With his entire army, he retreated. the city of Rome remained untouched. The people rejoiced, not just because they had been spared, but because they believed they had witnessed something far greater than a political victory. They had seen the hand of God at work, and the name of Pope Leo would forever be remembered, not for weapons raised, but for prayers offered, faith professed, and divine protection revealed. Whether this account is read as literal history or embraced as sacred legend, its meaning is no less powerful. It tells us something that transcends fact and touches the realm of faith. It reminds us that courage rooted in God is never weak, that leadership grounded in prayer can move hearts, and that when the Church faces moments of darkness, it is often the light of unseen grace that brings deliverance. In every age, the story of Pope Leo the Great continues to shine a beacon of spiritual clarity in the face of worldly confusion. And now, as Pope Leo XIV begins his journey of service, this legacy lives on, urging the Church to stand firm, speak truth with love, and always trust in the power of the Lord to defend what is His. The name Leo has always carried a weight that goes beyond history. It evokes strength, but not the strength of war or conquest. It points to a deeper kind of power. The power of conviction rooted in truth. The strength of leadership shaped by prayer and humility. In times of uncertainty, conflict, and moral confusion, this name rises once again. It has been chosen by a new pope who now leads the Church into a new chapter. And with that name comes a memory of spiritual protection, a legacy of vision, and a promise of victory through faith. In our present moment, such a name feels almost providential. And so, as the Church moves forward through these pivotal days, we look not only to the one now seated on the chair of Peter, but also to blessed Carlo Acutis, soon to be known as Saint Carlo. We ask for his prayers. May he intercede for us from heaven, guiding us, inspiring us, and reminding us that a life of faith, love, and truth is still possible today, just as it was during his short yet radiant time on earth. At the same time, the people of God lift up prayers for Pope Leo XIV. As he steps into his sacred role as successor of Saint Peter, we ask that the Lord grant him wisdom to discern, courage to lead, and the grace to shepherd with holiness, compassion, and truth. These days feel extraordinary. Saints in heaven and shepherds on earth appear more connected than ever, linked not only by circumstance, but by a divine thread of providence, history, and hope. Through it all, the Church continues her timeless mission, bringing the light of Christ into every place where darkness lingers. To some, the patterns emerging in these events may seem like simple coincidence, just a few names and dates that happen to overlap. But for those who see with eyes of faith, something deeper begins to come into view. This is more than symbolism. It is the quiet alignment of hearts and missions across generations. It is the meeting point between a young man who lived holiness in the digital age and a pope who now carries an ancient name with renewed strength. Carlo Acutis belonged to a modern world. He spoke the language of his generation. He built websites. He played video games. He understood the culture of the youth. But beneath that familiar exterior lived a soul on fire for God. His love for the Eucharist ran deep, so deep that it shaped everything he did. His life was not loud. He did not seek attention. Yet his quiet faith has already begun to reshape how young people view sanctity. He showed that holiness is not a distant ideal. It can take root in ordinary places, in classrooms, on buses, in quiet moments before the tabernacle. And now, as the Church enters a new season under the guidance of Pope Leo XIV, there is a powerful sense that something new is beginning. Emerging from a conclave few could have predicted, this Pope brings with him a name that echoes strength, fidelity, and clarity. He speaks with calm conviction. He leads with purpose, not with spectacle. And if the first milestone of his papacy is the canonization of Carlo Acutis, then this moment is more than ceremonial. It is prophetic. There is something poetic in the idea that the first great act of Pope Leo's leadership may be to raise a teenager to the altars, a saint not of a bygone era, but of the Church's present and future. Carlo's gentle witness, his deep love for the Eucharist, and his willingness to offer his suffering speak to a world that is constantly looking for something real, something enduring, something true. If Pope Leo sees his mission as one of reclaiming beauty, mystery, and sacred wonder in an age that often forgets them, then canonizing Carlo is a bold step in that direction. It proclaims that holiness is not extinct. It is not hidden. It is quietly awakening in the hearts of the faithful in school halls, bedrooms, city streets, and digital spaces. This connection between Carlo and Pope Leo is not a coincidence to be dismissed. It is not just a trivia point that Carlo's school was named after Pope Leo XIII, or that Pope Leo XIV claims that very pontiff as his inspiration. It is not simply a detail that Carlo offered his suffering for the Holy Father, and for the Church, just years before a pope would be chosen with the same name that marked the school where his faith grew strong. These moments are not disconnected fragments. They form a mosaic, one crafted not by human hands, but by divine providence. As the Church prepares to officially recognize Carlo as a saint, it feels like more than a celebration. It feels like a sign, a message, a reminder that the Church is not only ancient, it is alive. Its roots go deep, but its branches are reaching further than ever before. The story of Pope Leo XIV and Blessed Carlo Acutis is still unfolding. But even now, it already offers something beautiful. A glimpse of how God continues to write his story through lives great and small, through saints young and old, through leaders chosen for this very hour. And that story is one worth following with open eyes, open hearts, and a renewed desire for holiness. These are not just passing observations. They are quiet signals, moments of grace, quietly stitched into the fabric of time, gently pointing towards something deeper and more enduring. In a world driven by immediacy, where headlines shout and attention is fleeting, it is easy to overlook what does not demand to be seen. But Catholicism has never been about haste or spectacle. It has always found its strength in the slow, steady unfolding of truth. The Church does not rush. It watches. It discerns. It listens with patience, trusting that the Holy Spirit speaks, not always in thunder or lightning, but often in the soft whisper of grace. And right now, that whisper seems to be drawing our attention to two lives, two very different paths, each bearing witness to something eternal. One is just beginning, a pope called to lead more than 1 billion souls through a world that is constantly shifting. The other has already completed his earthly journey, a teenager whose life was brief, but whose legacy continues to grow with astonishing force. At first glance, they seem worlds apart. Yet the more we look, the more we see how closely they are aligned in spirit and purpose. Pope Leo XIV, formed by years of pastoral service, spiritual reflection, and humble leadership, accepted his call with a quiet readiness. His election did not arrive with grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It came with calm, with stillness, with the kind of presence that does not shout but commands respect through steadiness. In an age where volume is often mistaken for strength, his composure stands as its own quiet revolution. Carlo Acutis, by contrast, was a child of the digital age. His world was fast, full of information, screens, and endless distractions. But within that noise, he chose silence. He made time for God. He carved out sacred space in a life that could have easily been swallowed by busyness. Whether designing a website to document Eucharistic miracles or quietly praying before the tabernacle, Carlo grounded himself in the eternal. His holiness was not outdated. It was timeless. And that is why his witness speaks so clearly to our generation. When the Church gathers to canonize Carlo, and that day is fast approaching, it will be far more than a celebration of one holy life. It will be a declaration, a signpost for the entire Church. It will say that holiness is still possible, not only in monasteries or in distant centuries, but here now, in this very world. To raise a millennial to the altar of the saints is not just symbolic, it is prophetic. It speaks directly to the next generation, reminding them that sanctity is not something unreachable or buried in the past. It is something that can blossom in their lives, in their schools, in their friendships, and even in their relationship with technology. And that Pope Leo XIV may be the one to preside over this canonization only deepens the moment's meaning. His leadership is already being defined by a sense of renewal, not only of structure or practice, but of the spirit. The decision to honor Carlo at the beginning of this pontificate reflects a broader vision. One that seeks to rekindle Eucharistic devotion, to restore the beauty of worship, and to call the faithful, especially the young, back to holiness. The connection between Carlo and Pope Leo is not just meaningful. It is directional. It points forward. It suggests that the Church is not merely preserving the past, but also planting seeds for the future. And in this future, Carlo Acutis stands as a model not of withdrawal from the world, but of engagement with it. In canonizing Carlo, Pope Leo is not simply honoring a saint. He is recognizing a path. A way of being faithful in a world that often pulls hearts in other directions. Carlo did not run from technology. He used it to evangelize. He did not isolate himself from others. He lived among his peers. He enjoyed games and soccer and computers. But at the center of his life was the Eucharist. In that balance, he showed something remarkable: what it looks like to live authentically Catholic in the 21st century. To be modern and devout. To be youthful and reverent. To be immersed in the world without being consumed by it. This is the very challenge facing Pope Leo, as well: how to guide the Church in an age of distraction, where truth can seem lost in a sea of opinions and noise. How can the Church continue to proclaim what is eternal in a culture so often allergic to permanence? Carlo offers one answer. We do not water down the message. We live it. With joy, with clarity, with love that is not performative but real. That is what made his life so compelling. That is what can make the Church radiant again. The Church's future will not be built on nostalgia or the fading glow of the past, but on the courage to meet the present moment with hope. And in so many ways, Pope Leo XIV seems ready to meet that challenge. His early words have carried a gentle weight, words that speak of beauty, reverence, and the mystery of faith. In a world that measures success by speed and efficiency, his voice sounds almost foreign. And maybe that is precisely the point. The Catholic Church has never been in a race with the culture. It speaks in a different rhythm. One that does not bend to trends but rests in truth. Carlo Acutis understood that rhythm in his own time. And now, it seems, Pope Leo does too. The more closely you look, the more it begins to feel like a conversation, not just between two individuals, but between generations. Carlo represents the rising faithful. Young people who are deeply immersed in a digital world, searching for meaning in the whirlwind of information. Pope Leo represents the enduring wisdom of the Church, watchful, rooted, patient. One brings the fire of youth, the other the steady light of tradition. Together, they reveal a Church that remembers where it came from and is unafraid to go where it must. And if we are quiet enough to listen, we may hear more. A whisper. An invitation. A reminder that holiness has never been limited to altars or abbeys. Saints still rise up, some in Roman basilicas, others in bedrooms dimly lit by screens and silent prayers. The grace is the same. The call is the same. God still speaks. What lies ahead is unknown, but perhaps that is part of the mystery. Perhaps what comes next is a renewed devotion to the Eucharist, kindled by Carlo's passionate love for the real presence and echoed in the reverent silence of Pope Leo. Perhaps it will be a movement among young Catholics, not to flee the world, but to sanctify it from within. Maybe we will rediscover the Rosary, the sacred quiet of adoration, or the beauty of sacred tradition spoken anew in the language of today. Or maybe the greatest change will not come through movements or campaigns at all. Maybe it will be this: people beginning to believe again that sainthood is real. That it is not something lost to history, but something that still calls our name. That the Church is not an artifact, but the living body of Christ, moving, breathing, praying, even whispering grace into the digital noise. And that is what makes this moment extraordinary. Not simply that we have a tech-savvy teenager on the path to sainthood. Not only that we have a new pope named Leo, but that somehow, across time and culture and generation, these two lives are speaking to each other. And through them, God is speaking to us. Since the election of Pope Leo XIV, and with anticipation building for the canonization of Blessed Carlo Acutis, something unusual is unfolding, not within the walls of the Vatican, but out in the world. In youth groups. On university campuses. In quiet chapels no headline will mention. A subtle stirring is taking place. Young Catholics, so often labeled indifferent or disconnected, are beginning to lean in. They are paying attention. They are seeing something they have not seen in a long time. A church that is not trying to imitate their culture, but instead is offering them something deeper, something beautiful, something true. It is not loud, it is not viral, but it is real. Teenagers are reaching for their rosaries again, not out of guilt, but because they've read about Carlo and his deep Marian devotion. College students are showing up for Eucharistic adoration, not because someone told them to, but because they are curious about a boy who believed that 1 hour before the Blessed Sacrament could change your soul. And many of them are surprised to find that, once they enter that silence, they do not want to leave. This is not a revolution in the way the world defines it. It is quieter, holier, it is unfolding in hearts. And that is precisely why it matters. When a young person sees someone like them, someone who played video games, loved soccer, coded websites, and prayed deeply, when they see that person declared a saint, something happens. A door opens. A new thought takes root. I can be holy too. Right now. Just as I am. And when that message is quietly reinforced by a pope who is more interested in soul than spectacle, who leads not with noise, but with clarity, trust begins to return. Trust that the Church has not forgotten what matters. Trust that beauty and mystery are not lost, but waiting to be rediscovered. Trust that Catholicism is not a performance, it is a transformation. In Pope Leo XIV, many young Catholics are beginning to see something they had not expected. A leader who is not racing to reinvent the Church, but to remind it who she truly is. And in Blessed Carlo, they see someone who answered that identity with humility and joy, not by withdrawing from the world, but by walking through it with grace. The genius of this moment is not in its novelty. It is in its clarity. 2 lives, decades apart, meeting in the same purpose. Both pointing back to the Eucharist. Both reminding the world that holiness is not some lofty, unreachable ideal, but a call that still echoes today. In every generation, God raises up saints. He does not wait for perfect conditions. He simply finds hearts that are willing. And now, in a time of global noise and confusion, he has found 2, one seated in Peter's chair, and one still known simply as Carlo. And through them, he is whispering to the world once more. Come back. Come deeper. Come home. And now, as the world watches quietly, all eyes begin to turn toward what lies ahead. Because while the connection between Pope Leo XIV and Blessed Carlo Acutis is rich with symbolism, it is not just beautiful, it is weighty. If Carlo becomes the first saint to be canonized under this new papacy, it will not merely be a historic moment. It will become a message, a tone setter, a spiritual compass for the journey that this pontificate and the Church itself is about to undertake. It will say something loud and clear to the next generation. You belong here. You are called here. You are needed here. And that is no small message. For decades now, a quiet ache has lived in the hearts of many young Catholics. A longing not to be seen as numbers or demographics or a generation to study, but as souls. Souls capable of greatness, of sacrifice, of unshakable joy. In the canonization of Carlo Acutis, under the gentle and steady hand of Pope Leo, the Church could offer one of its most powerful answers to that longing in an entire generation. But this moment is not just a gift. It is a calling. It asks something in return. It asks young Catholics not to wait until holiness is convenient. It asks them to come now to the Mass, to prayer, to one another. It invites them to show up not just physically, but spiritually. It asks them to believe, even when belief costs something. Perhaps most of all, it urges them to listen not just to influencers and trends, but to the still small voice that once whispered to Carlo, and is still whispering now. Because this is not a spectacle. This is a seed. A small but deliberate act of grace, being planted quietly in the heart of the Church. The world may not notice. The headlines may pass it over. But within the soul of the Church, something is beginning to shift. A gentle turning toward what is sacred. A reawakening of reverence. A return to silence. And it is happening not through institutions or campaigns, but through the lives of a teenage boy and a humble pope, neither loud, neither seeking fame, but both carrying something eternal. This movement is not finished. It has only just begun to speak. And perhaps that is what makes this moment so extraordinary. Not the grandeur of the event, but the precision of its timing. A pope, chosen against all odds, takes on a name that stirs centuries of meaning. A teenager, already gone from this world, continues to breathe new life into it with his purity, his clarity, his joyful devotion. And between them, though they never met, something passes. Something sacred. Something unspoken. A quiet transmission of mission. A sense of continuity, of calling, of grace that is not bound by time. Pope Leo XIV may never have walked beside Carlo. He may never have heard his voice or seen the fire in his eyes. But in this hour, he carries the weight of a church at a moment when Carlo's legacy is rising. And maybe that is exactly how it was meant to be. Because in the mystery of the church, past and present are never truly separate. In God's providence, the lives of saints and the decisions of popes do not just run parallel. They intersect. They echo. They converge in the quiet places of the soul. And it is there, in that sacred stillness, that the Church finds her future not through noise, but through the enduring whisper of grace. Time folds. Names echo. And heaven walks gently beside history. In the end, this is not just about a papal name or a long-awaited canonization. It is something far deeper. It is about the Church remembering who she truly is. About lifting her eyes once again to the sacred. About rediscovering awe in the Eucharist, finding beauty in the simplicity of prayer, and recovering strength in the gift of silence. It is about believing once more that saints are not museum pieces or distant memories, but companions, friends, lights along the path. It is about remembering that holiness is not an unreachable mountaintop. It is a present invitation. A voice that calls softly but clearly even now. So as Pope Leo XIV steps forward in quiet leadership, and blessed Carlo Acutis intercedes from his place among the blessed, the Church is left with a choice. Not just to admire this moment from afar, but to step into it. With faith, with hope, with love. Because this is not just a moment to witness, it is a moment to live. The Church is not merely watching history unfold. She is walking it step by step, soul by soul, heart by heart. And heaven is walking with her.